Now, Brett, I talked a lot through Moneyline Magic, so please, we're jumping into baseball now. Give us our first pick because I need a break from speaking.
No worries, man. You carried the money line magic. You filled me in. We shouted out our guy Rory Sabatini, and
Cheers to
now
him.
it's time. Yeah, and now it's time to get to this Cleveland Indians Toronto Blue Jays game. Higgins, before we start on this, I actually have a quick question for you. Sorry to throw it
No
back so
worries.
quickly. But what do you think of the Guardians' nickname for the Cleveland Indians?
I think Cleveland didn't quite do their full due diligence because apparently there's a roller derby team that filed for a trademark with the same name, so maybe someone should have been doing a little bit more homework before they announced their name, is what I'm thinking, because we're going to have some interesting battles coming up, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, they're to be honest, they're gonna get it right, but it might cost them a
They'll
few
get it. It might just
extra
cost them some
shekels.
money, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, we've got Eli Morgan on the mound for the Cleveland baseball team, and we've got Robbie Ray on the mound for the Toronto Blue Jays. Higgins. Run line Cleveland plus 1.5 at plus 130. Toronto minus 1.5 at minus 156. On the money line, you can get Cleveland plus 260, Toronto minus 320. I'm personally looking at this over under Higgins. Eli Morgan has an ERA north of 7. Robbie Ray, kind of up and down all year himself, has some good starts, has some bad starts. I think these lineups with Jose Ramirez on Cleveland's side, even without Cesar Hernandez, who was traded at the deadline, Jose Ramirez, Framil Reyes, these are some big power bats. They can absolutely take Robbie Ray over that fence. The Blue Jays, just look 1 through 9 in their lineup, Higgins. They have tons of bats. Added Barrios at the deadline. I don't know if it's enough to compete in the AL East, but we will see, Higgins. But I like the over 9.5 minus 106. So a little juice to the under, favoring the sports books, but favoring the betters. If you think 10 runs are scored in this one, minus 106.
Well, like you said, Cleveland has a pitcher on the mound with an ERA north of 7. Cleveland's pretty good at hitting the overs on the year. They're fourth best in the MLB. Toronto hitting unders a little bit more than they're hitting overs on the year, but they're pretty close to 500. I want to stick on this game, though, Brett, because I'm also looking at it. Because whenever I see the run line offering the underdog for positive value, I got to take a closer look at it. So, like you said, we got Morgan versus Ray on the mound. Morgan has an ERA north of 7. Toronto is also back in Toronto. They're not playing in Buffalo anymore. They're playing back in Toronto. They had their opening series at home against the Kansas City Royals over the weekend, and they swept them pretty handedly as well. But now it's Monday. Now everyone's going back to the grind. Now everyone's going to be settled back down a little bit. The adrenaline's going to have settled in now that they're all back in Toronto a little bit. A new series starts. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be all Blue Jays like it was throughout the weekend. And when you look at Cleveland overall so far this year on the run line as an underdog, they're 30-21. They're just over 500 so far cumulatively as a whole against the run line. Toronto's fourth best in the MLB, but Cleveland's ninth best in the MLB against the run line. So they're both doing pretty well at it. Plus 1.5 at plus 130. The value is just too good. I don't think necessarily the Indians win this game. However, I do think that the plus 1.5 value is good enough for me to hope that it just stays within a one run game. So let me have it. Let me have it. Plus 130.
All right, Higgins. Well, I've got one more game I'm on Monday night. The Phillies take on the Nationals. Nationals big sellers over the weekend, trading Trey Turner and Max Scherzer to the Los Angeles Dodgers. But one of the players they got back, Higgins, Josiah Gray. Actually, would you believe it, Higgins? A Lemoyne College graduate.
Le
So
Moyne dudes?
go. Yes, go Josiah Grade, former Lemoyne dude. That is a little joke between Higgins and myself, but we're gonna focus on this baseball game once I stop laughing. But the Nationals, Higgins, plus 105 on the money line against the Philadelphia Phillies, who bullpen continues to just blow game after game after game all year for this team. So I'm going to take the Nats as underdogs because Ranger Suarez is starting for the Phillies. I know nothing about Ranger Suarez, have no opinion on him. So let's say he's a league average starter. I'm going to take Juan Soto and Josh Hamilton against him. And then I'm going to take the Nationals lineup against the Phillies bullpen. I'll take any lineup in baseball against the Phillies bullpen this year, Higgins. It has just been a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look uh at what at Ranger Suarez, and he is a bullpen pitcher. He's a guy that fills in on the bullpen days because he may be a 4-2 starter with a 1.2 ERA, but he has 4 saves on the year. He has 40 innings worth of pitching on his belt this season. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and give you 5 innings. Excuse me, he's 5-3 on the year, not 4-2. I misspoke. But that's a very interesting one. Brett, to be honest, though, since the Nationals were sellers, this was a stay away game for me because I don't know what to expect from Washington for the rest of the year. I don't really know what to expect from the Phillies because whenever they are listed as favorites on the run line, they're atrocious this year at 14-35. But that doesn't mean that they lose the game. They just don't cover multi-run wins. So I'm staying away from this game. Absolutely, you can't find me on a side with this one.
Yeah, well, I you got to back the Lemoyne dude and Higgins. I'm sorry, I misspoke. In New Jersey, they're plus 102, so give me them at plus 102.
Alrighty. I found another game. This one's going to be the West Coast visiting the East Coast. Seattle Mariners facing off against the Tampa Bay Rays. And we have an over-under set at 8.5 when we have Michael Wacha on the mound for Tampa Bay versus Chris Flexen on the mound for Seattle. Your boy Chris Flexen, who's 9-3, Brett, has an ERA of a 3.81, and Michael Wacha, the former Mets pitcher, who has an ERA just under 5. This over under set at 8.5 feels a bit low to me. I'm going to be taking the over at minus 115, especially when you look at how these teams have really performed on the over under this year. If you look, Seattle, they're 55-48-3 on the over under this year, so they're about in the top 10. And then if you look at Tampa Bay, they are fifth in the over unders this year in the MLB with a record of 57-45-3 at hitting their overs. So both these teams have the active bats. Tampa Bay also just added Nelson Cruz to that lineup a couple weeks ago, so it should be very interesting to see. I think 8.5 is just too small. I wouldn't be surprised if it's at 9.
Yeah, I mean we will see what happens with that line. I think the Mariners, Higgins, not being talked about enough right now. They're playing some good baseball as of late. They were kind of pissed at the deadline. Called out some players called out their ownership or whatever. So they actually made some moves to kind of correct that wrong and picked up a player from the Tampa Bay Rays, Diego Castillo. So that'll be an interesting series to watch.
It really will. I have one more baseball game, or one more baseball pick, I should say, rather, Brett, before we get out of here, because it's 2 games. I have an MLB parlay, and it's because the money line value on both of these favorites was a little too rich for me individually, so you're going to find me on them together. And that's going to be the Brewers and the Giants money line. You add them together, and they're plus 147. The Brewers, they're hosting the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have been absolutely atrocious on the road this year. They're 17-35. Honestly, I wouldn't have much of a reservation picking them to win outright on their own, but they're minus 200 on the money line. That's too rich for me. If it isn't for you, though, go ahead and take it because I do not see Milwaukee losing this game. And then The Giants are going to be in Arizona facing off against the Diamondbacks. And remember, there was a stretch where the Diamondbacks had lost 20 straight or something like that. The Diamondbacks are not having a fantastic year. They are the bottom of the barrel in the NL West. They are going to be the kicking pole for everybody else in that NL West for the rest of this season. The Giants have DeSclafani coming onto the mound for them to face off against Widener, and so they are minus 155 on the money line. I still don't like that. That's still too rich for me, kind of like what we've said, Brett. Minus 145, minus 140 is about the highest I will go in terms of a money line value that's a favorite. So I add them together. I get plus 147, a pretty good parlay for just 2 games.
Yeah, we shall see, Higgins. I guess I like both of those games individually as well, but I'm always afraid to parlay in baseball because baseball is such a weird game. Anything has happened. As Joey Votto put it so eloquently, he hit a blooper that carried for his first home run of his streak, and he misses out on 9 games in a row on his home run streak. It comes to an end at 8 games on a 109-mile-per-hour ball hit into the top of the fence at Citi Field. So, baseball, it's a crazy game. The Reds actually lost that game where Joey Votto misses out on a home run by inches. So,
So close.
just an absolutely crazy game. I'm afraid to parlay, but you laid it out beautifully. I think the Giants significantly better than the Diamondbacks. I think the Brewers significantly better than the Padres.
And one more topic
I'm
in
sorry,
MLB before.
Pirates.
Oh, you're
Pirates.
you're fine, Brett.
I
No
can't
worries
say
about that.
Padres. I can't say Padres.
Well, I was about to actually bring up the Padres though, because before we jump out of the MLB, we just got news Fernando Tatis is going to have season-ending surgery on his shoulder. Jacob DeGrom, he's on the IL and is going to have at least a rehab start or two before he comes back from his forearm stiffness. So at least in Oregon, I can't bet on the NL postseason awards for things like the MVP or the Cy Young. Brett, do you have those available? And who would you be looking at now? I guess for the NL, in terms of MVP, Nick Castellanos is probably a name that you could be looking at. And then for Cy Young, you got to be looking at some of those Brewers pitchers in terms of a Corbin Burns, maybe a Brandon Woodruff or Freddie Peralta. And then even you got Kevin Gausman and then a slew of pitchers down in the Padres. So there's plenty of other Cy Young guys to potentially catch and take that from Jacob DeGrom now that he's on the IL for a second time this year. But it's just very interesting now because the NL has had front runners rather heavily throughout much of the season, and now that they are down, the books don't know what to do. So there should be some value to find.
Yeah, so National League MVP odds here in New Jersey on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Fernando Tatis minus 140, Trey Turner plus 320, Max Muncy, Trey Turner's new teammate, but they haven't met because I'm pretty sure Trey Turner is in COVID protocols. Max Muncy plus 500, Freddie Freeman plus 750, Jacob DeGrom plus 1600, and Buster Posey plus 5500. Higgins. Buster Posey and the San Francisco Giants getting some love in the top 6 there from FanDuel. For the NL Cy Young Award odds, you got Walker Buehler plus 350, Brandon Woodruff plus 390, Corbin Burns plus 400, Kevin Gossman plus 400, Zach Wheeler plus 460, Jacob DeGrom plus 600. Higgins, you asked if I see any value. Well, in the top 6, I would say Kevin Gossman for the NL Cy Young plus 400. I think those are fair odds for him at this point. He's technically tied for third with Corbin Burns at plus 400, but Gossman's had a fantastic year. The San Francisco Giants blowing everyone's expectations for that team out of that water, becoming buyers at the deadline, landing Chris Bryant from the Cubs. So, Kevin Gossman plus 400. That one piques my interest. I'm not going to bet it. I took long shot odds, Higgins, with the Seattle Seahawks on this episode, but Kevin Gossman's certainly interesting to look at, in my opinion.
The one name that you also didn't mention that I would be looking at just because he leads the NL in wins right now and could potentially be the first to get to 20, and if he extends away from some people, might jump up in value. Julio Urias with the Dodgers as well. I mean, those Dodgers pitchers, they have plenty of bats behind them to help make them become a standout for their season now. But just some interesting questions, interesting things to look at. That NL Cy Young award has suddenly become an absolute race with the DeGrom news of him being out for a second time. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very, very, very interesting, I'd say.